Hello, this is Bunny Rabbit Lips, and we're gonna continue with the Raging Loop. If the snake's target is killed by the wolves, the snake's power will be wasted, right?
死んだ人はカラスが調べればいいことだから。
違うよ。夜に殺されるのは狼が選ぶんだから、間違いなく人間だよ。カラスはあくまで昼に宴で選ばれて殺された人の正体を知れるだけ。
Oh man.
あ、そうか。確かに。
Whatever the case, perhaps investigating Kyonosuke Shi wasn't that much of a mistake. Did that mean that they were actually doing a decent job? Well, it'd be pretty bad if Kansoshi was the one to go. Chiemi looked gloomy. She and I probably felt that it wasn't a complete blunder, but still had a bad feeling about it. During the feast, everyone had to lock themselves somewhere all alone around every sunset. It was called sheltering. Well, I could understand it, considering the legends, but I'd still wondered why the students didn't go to school. It was a weekday. When I'd asked, they just told me, why would we leave when it's so dangerous? The idea that they couldn't leave when the mist was here was so popular, it affected their daily lives. Also, the people at Kami Fujiyoshi had to know that Yasumizu was covered in mist, right? Considering the school there probably had few students to begin with, the non-presence of the three from Yasumizu would normally be a serious problem. I knew it was a settlement for the ostracized, but did they really neglect this place that badly? Looking at it from that angle, it was safe to assume that the local villages, Kami Fujiyoshi included, actually concealed the feast of the Yomi Purge. I thought about that and similar things in room 203 of the student dorm, the place I was given. Chiemi had given me some cup ramen and hot water. I'd chatted for a moment about being neighbors for a while, and then she returned to her room. Weird we could be so casual about this, considering there was a chance we wouldn't meet again tomorrow. After dinner, I took a bath. The gas boiler was pretty damn old, so learning how to use it took a while. There were some working electrical outlets too, so I could charge my phone. I didn't have a wristwatch, so that was important. By the way, my room didn't have a kitchen. I was pretty sure the other rooms didn't either. From what I could tell, no one here actually cooked or ate at their own homes. They all relied on the dining hall to provide their meals. This settlement had not only a unique culture, but a way of life as well. I couldn't help but wonder how something like this began and survived into the modern era. It was an interesting subject to research, but for now I had to worry about the fact that my life was in danger. Anyway, what were my options now? I wasn't part of the feast, but walking around at night was probably dangerous regardless. After all, I had memories of getting killed doing exactly that. From a logical standpoint, that was probably just a dream. But it had a quality to it that made it hard to believe it was. I had to be careful until I was certain. Then again, I had a record of surviving by just not making any noise at night. Maybe I should have stayed awake and looked around. Also, Takumi-san had said they were gonna have someone keep watch at night, didn't he? Was he gonna do it himself? Considering the snake's importance, he shouldn't do something so dangerous. Shit, they'd barely decided anything in the feast. I wasn't getting enough info either. I felt like I barely knew the basics. Talking during the feast meant giving info to the wolves, but if the humans kept too many things hidden, the wolves would end up knowing way more than them, and that was just dangerous. Still, there was a limit to what I could do in my situation. If I kept being the messenger I was today, I could create a huge imbalance of info myself. Not to mention, I could be deemed suspicious and lose the residents' trust. Shit, what was I supposed to do here? Was it best for me to just stay quiet and wait for the feast to end? That wasn't like me at all. There was a mail slot on the door. I opened it up and looked outside. Everything was still covered in mist, so I couldn't see much. I could only see the handrail and the branches going in the hallway. But maybe I could see some intruder if I kept staring? Not likely. After all, this was the room at the end of the second floor. Had a chance, and Chiemi's rooms were closer to the stairs, so I couldn't see anyone going to attack them. The only time I could see the monster come would be when it was coming for me. Maybe keeping watch like this was the most important thing if I wanted to stay alive, but I found it hard to put my own life on the priority list. For some reason, I felt like if I died, I'd just go back to the starting point. Yeah, better not to think that. Anyway, I had to stay awake. I still had many things to worry and think about. Day 14. Get it. What? As I woke up and tried to move, my head rubbed against something tough and then smacked into the doorknob. I writhed in pain. What was going on? Did I fall asleep against the door? Was I more tired than I thought? I was glad I didn't die and all, but this was a failure in my eyes. Sleeping in an unnatural position made my whole body hurt. I wobbled over to my fully charged phone. It was 6 o'clock. That was early morning for me. I'd have loved to just go back to sleep, but I was too curious about the feast. After washing my face with hot water and putting on my shoes, I decided to take a peek through the mail slot. Oh shit. Outside I saw Chiemi standing there with a knife in hand. I reflexively stepped back, tripped, and fell on my ass. What the hell was that? There was a woman standing before my room with a weapon. I'd only caught a glimpse, but that was enough to conclude that I was dealing with a scene straight out of a horror movie. What could have prompted this? Did she suspect I was a wolf, or was she a wolf herself? She knocked on the door, making me squeal a bit.
Haruaki-san! Haruaki-san! 起きてる?
Girl, put the knife away. The fuck? Would she kill me if I replied?
ハルアキさん起きて。他のみんなの様子を見て回るから付き合ってほしいんだ。ちなみに私は現在凶器を所持してますが、ご信用につき心配なきよう。
That's what I was thinking too, but I mean, I don't know, man. I'd be pretty scared too.
紛らわしい。
あ、起きてた。大丈夫大丈夫。ほら、凶器はちょっと離れたところに置きました。
Jesus Christ. I hesitantly peeked through the mail slot and saw her hopping around, showing me her empty hands. After meeting up with Chiemi, we went around the dorm and woke up the students. All of them were alright. While they got ready, we went to the Nosato mansion, just 'cause it was close. Yasumisu was still misty and unpleasantly silent. I walked carefully just like yesterday morning. I couldn't write off the possibility that a werewolf would jump out of the mist and tear me apart. It'd be over for me. I was walking ahead, dragging Chiemi by the hand, careful about where I was going. If something happened and I got eaten or something, Chiemi could either fight back or run away.
誰かいるのか?
Yes.
あ、野里さん、夫妻子とちえみちゃんです。
どこだ? そこか。
We peered through the mist, and a gloomy frown appeared.
いやー、どうも。
屋敷は大丈夫だったみたいですね。
当然だろう。屋敷には古臭いながらもセキュリティ設備が設けられている。化け物だろうが侵入できるとは思えんね。
Don't give them ideas, they'll take it as a challenge.
そっか。じゃあみんなで避難させてもらえます?
No.
なぜそんなことをせねばならんのかね。これは安水の問題だろう。
Man, I'm sure you're gonna die next, boy.
そっか、そうですよね。じゃあ安水の問題解決のため、とっとと下に降りてます。
待ちたまえ。急ぎ動かないと危険だろう。
Ah, no que no. Really? I was beginning to think this guy was best described as all bark, no bite. Though prideful and vain, he wasn't as smart as he claimed to be, as shown by his inability to take charge of the feast. Also, his fussy attitude was probably just him making up for his fear. It was entirely possible he was just putting on an air and that the mystery of Yasumizu, or rather Fujiyoshi, was actually scaring him. Anyway, we went downhill and met up with the students.
慣れた道でも不気味なもんだね。
だね。霧って不思議だ。
これなら脱いでも怒られない。
やめろ、バカ者。
Haru Makishima was acting weird. Mochi was definitely expecting a retort from her. She didn't say anything, and her face was so pale you could tell through the mist. Hanging her head, she was slightly shaking. Everyone else could see it too, but no one chose to address it. Questions would quickly become suspicious after all. Perhaps she was a wolf and did something horrific last night? As we all thought similar things, she suddenly collapsed to the ground.
大丈夫か、はるちゃん。
触らないで。
Her hoarse scream shocked everyone.
はるちゃん。
兄ちゃん、違う。ごめん。だけど、今は、
そうだよね。神経質にもなるよ。足元に気をつけて。
We then slowed down. Haru-chan, not touching anyone's hands, was at the rear of the group. As we walked, trees and stones drifted in and out of visibility through the surrounding mist. Our vision was so limited it felt like the world around us was changing with every step we took. A tunnel of trees, a path on the paddy field, a stone platform, a concrete stairway. We walked between realms every passing second. I was still wondering about Haru-chan. What was on her mind? Was she afraid or wary? After descending for a bit, we arrived at the plaza.
みんな無事ね。
We met two more people in front of the dining hall.
ご老人方は朝寝坊かね。
ばあちゃんは身支度中だ。体調が良くねえらしい。これから来てねえ連中のところを回る。キヨ、お前はついてこい。
なぜ君が私に命令する？
男手がいるかもしれねえからだ。夫妻氏、悪いがあんたも頼むぜ。
This was the first time he'd ordered me to do something, but it wasn't a situation where I could be happy about him relying on me.
ええ、もちろん。
God damn it. He probably had a bad feeling. Namely, that he wouldn't be able to rely on a certain someone ever again. As I passed by Kaori-san, I heard her whisper.
あのね、安永、ちょっといい？
何、母さん。
義継を探してほしいの。離れにいないようだから。
No, the baby? Is Yoshitsugu the little boy? Everyone probably had a bad feeling about this. The three of us guys checked the houses. Yasunaga-kun, Chiemi, and Mochi walked around the settlement. Okay, no. Mochi's different. Okay, so Mochi's safe. Then who's missing? I forgot their names. Maybe if I saw their face I would recognize. We'd agreed to split up and start searching. The misty village was silent. I couldn't hear anyone chatting. I'd seen these buildings from the outside, but it was my first time actually walking in. The shabby buildings built using blackened planks were more or less buried in vegetation. Some were on the verge of collapse. The way their frames jutted from the mist reminded me of the carcasses of giant beasts. I walked on a line between the grass, a footpath surely. I often heard something small jump in the grass. It was probably just some bugs or frogs, but it still made me flinch.
リカコさんはここに住んでいるのだったか。
ああ、そこんちだ。
くそ。なんだって彼女がこんな場所に住まねばならん。
お前が知らねえんだったら俺らが知るわけねえだろうが。身車あたりの指図じゃねえのか。
私が知る限りでは彼女が休みずに移ったのは自主的とのことだがね。第一必要がない。
ひょっとしたら霧が立つんで魔除けのまじないでもしに来たんじゃねえか。無駄だったがよ。
室匠、私ならともかく彼女を相手にあんまり口が過ぎるんじゃないかね。相手は上藤吉の長者の正統だぞ。
What's like wrong with him talking about all these pedigree stuff or whatever?
知るか。ここは休みずだ。あいつ自分で言ってたろうが、宴になりゃみんな食われんだよ。
リカ子さん、リカ子さん、ご無事ですか？
Apparently, Takumi-san didn't like the Uematsu family, or the four-head families in general. Now that I thought about it, though she wasn't as disliked as Kyonosukeshi, the villagers in general weren't fond of Rikako Uematsu. That's rude, man. She seems nice. It seemed like a pretty obvious outcome, though. Yasumitsu was the settlement for the ostracized. It was impossible for a member of one of the head families who openly spurned them to form a good relationship with the locals. Rikako-san emerged before too long. She was wearing her usual strange getup, and she didn't seem any different from how she looked yesterday.
メイコを連れて行きませんと。
We moved on to the next house. I felt like Rikako-san was urging me, so I woke the girl up.
メイコちゃん、朝だよ。
Well, I couldn't imagine Rikako-san raising her voice, while the other two probably didn't feel like they had to get involved with the girl. After a few calls, she finally came out, still half asleep.
メイコ、よかった。
キヨ、二人を食堂まで連れて行ってやれ。
リカ子さん、こちらへ。足元に気をつけて。
はい。
She was apparently trying to get my attention, so I turned around and said, yes?
ごめんなさい。
For what? Again? Her sudden apology left me completely confused. She then departed alongside the other two, leaving me alone with Takumi-san.
いいんですか？清之助さんがいなくて。
どうせ役に立たねえ。植松の坊主もどきがくたばってたら運ばせようと思ってたけどよ。もう誰がやられたか分かったから。
Who got killed?
まだ狼じじい氏の可能性も。
適当言うな。おやっさんが生きてたら誰より早起きしてとっくに休みずを3週くらいはしてるっつうんだ。
Oh my gosh. Relax, Takumi. He's new here. He does not know, he does not understand. You don't have to, snap.
すまねえ。奥野がおやっさんの家だ。
Dang it, I skipped it.
すまねえ。奥野がおやっさんの家だ。
I followed him in silence. I couldn't think of anything to say. The fact the door was unlocked made it clear that something wasn't right. The moment I opened it, my nostrils were assaulted by a smell I'd experienced just yesterday. The reek of a fresh corpse. Unlike Takumi-san, who was looking away and cursing, I did my best to burn the scene I witnessed into my memory. I felt like to avert my eyes would be disrespectful, and chided myself for wanting to look away. His body was much more intact than Mamiya-san and Hashimoto-san's. That made it much easier to become painfully aware of the fact that this was a human, an intelligent life form who was with us yesterday like it was no big deal. There was one problem though. The part of the body that used to be the head was completely destroyed. There was no part of the head left untouched. It was obviously the result of relentless heavy blunt attacks. Everything above the neck was just a strange, flat mass of shattered skull fragments and white and red organic matter. Compared to it, everything else was largely unharmed. The old-looking clothing and the unexpectedly robust chest for someone his age were all the proof needed to know that this was the body of Kanso Makishimashi. Oh, that's so sad, man. What the heck, man? Well, we gotta help Haru-chan now.
片付けるんですか？
当たり前だろ。
少しだけ時間をください。
You need a hug, boy?
どうする気だ？
できる限りのことを調べます。
Since we had no idea when we could get out of here, protecting the scene of the crime for an official investigation meant we had to leave this body to rot here, and we just couldn't do that. And considering the horrible state it was in, the villagers probably wanted to take care of it their own way as soon as possible. Not much I could do to stop that. Thus, I did my duty as someone without such obligations. This corpse was completely unlike the ones from yesterday. While those two were destroyed completely, the damage on this one was focused on the head. The weapon clearly wasn't sharp. They used something blunt. The skin on his face was torn, but not sliced apart, and the skull was shattered. This was caused by repeated blunt attacks on the head. It wasn't my job to picture whether there was some profound grudge in this. The only clear thing here was that the wolves killed him using something blunt, not claws or fangs, and it was obviously done with dedicated intent, not accidentally. At the very least, the entity that made this corpse wasn't the same as the one that made the ones from yesterday. It made sense if you separated them and assumed that yesterday's was a corruption and today's was the wolves. But the thing I'd seen when I was walking around at night that time had the appearance of a wolf, or rather, a werewolf. If the werewolves were the ones bringing the corruption, the tale all this was based on would make even less sense. If the corruption was Great Lord Shinai's, the mountain god's punishment, it'd be weird for it to be delivered by the wolves. Holding back my nausea, I looked back at the corpse. Then I rolled back my sleeves and reached for the destroyed head.
おい、何を？
ないと思いますが、一応調べます。
Decapitation meant body doubles. Mystery Writing 101. If someone brought in and killed a person with a similar build to Kansoshi's, then left him there, his death could easily be fake.
肝臓さん、下顎に銀歯ありました？
いや、ねえよ。
His voice was strangely forced. I looked at him and realized he was kinda pale. I might have overdone it. Still, I couldn't be soft in this situation.
おやっさんは60過ぎて差し歯も何にも入れてねえの自慢してたから。あったのか？
Bro.
いえ、誘導を避けるための質問です。健康な歯がびっしりですよ。
Damn it.
なんだよ。
The lower jaw was mostly intact, while the upper one was destroyed along with the rest of the head. Despite that, I saw a hint of the old man in the eyebrows and the dark hair with streaks of gray in them. It was pretty clear it was the one and only Kanso Makishimashi, so it was probably pointless to keep thinking about the way he was injured. My hands were all messy. I'd have to wash them later. The corpse aside, Kansoshi was lying on some thin bedding and there was no sign of a struggle. He was either instantly killed by the first attack or knocked out, laid here and then killed. Still, it wasn't a corpse that was easy to make. The situation here was peculiar. One point I found curious was the fact that Kansoshi surely obeyed the shelter law and locked himself in. However, the lock on the door was still perfectly intact. So logically speaking, Kansoshi had opened the door and let the culprit in. There was no sign of resistance, so it was probably done by someone he felt safe with. Oh boy, you better not. No. However, if this was a normal killing by the standards of the Feast of the Yummy Perch, then this was definitely made possible by something unnatural. Back to the situation at hand. Actually guys, we're just gonna leave it right here, and thank you for watching. Please leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. Bye!